Back to Washington Journal. We're joined now by Representative Don Bacon. He's a Republican of Nebraska and a member of the Armed Services Committee. Welcome to the program.
Thank you. It's always good to be on.
It's always good to have you. You've been in the Air Force for 30 years. You retired as a one-star general, served overseas. I want to talk about the situation in Los Angeles. Do you agree with President Trump's decision to federalize the National Guard, I should say, and the Marines?
Short answer, yes. And the main reason I say that is because the chief of police there said that he needed help. He was being overwhelmed. And so I think that's the main justification in my mind why you help. And the Guard should be there to help the police. The Marines should be there to help the Guard and the police. It's all about supporting law enforcement. But when the chief of police says he's being overwhelmed and needs help, I think that's a defining statement.
Are the Marines appropriate in this case?
I would stick with the Guard if it was me. But if the Marines are well trained and are very focused, maybe it's providing defense of federal facilities, things like that. If it's a very defined mission, I think we'll be fine. But the state Guard is there for these purposes, and that should be the primary military branch or the military personnel to help out a state.
So you mentioned the chief of police. The California Attorney General had said that local law enforcement had the situation contained and that it escalated when federal troops came in. What's your reaction to that?
Yeah, but who escalated? Putting the federal troops there, they weren't hitting people. They weren't burning the cars. They weren't creating the violence. They were just they're there to help the police. You have to blame the violence on the protesters who are doing the car burnings, the throwing bricks at police, and things like that. Can't blame the people who are doing the violence. The Guard, as far as I could tell, they did zero escalation. They were just there to help. Bottom line, if the chief of police says he needs help, I think that's a very defining statement.
There are concerns that President Trump will invoke the Insurrection Act. He has mentioned that he is open to that. What's your reaction to that, and the using of the U.S. military in domestic action?
Well, that should be a very last case scenario, and I don't think we're there yet. Hopefully, I think we're seeing a little bit of a de-escalation, so let's let it de-escalate. The Guard should be called up as a very last measure, and should be very reluctant to do that, I would just say.
I want to ask you about an article in the Washington Post with the headline, "Immigration Authorities Raided an Omaha Meat Production Plant Tuesday Morning and Took Dozens of Workers Away in Buses, Leaving company officials bewildered because they said they had followed the law." Now, the head of that company had said, look, we used E-Verify, and the immigration officer said to him, the system's down, I guess, or E-Verify is not working, and he's like, what am I supposed to do with that information?
It sounds to me like the company did everything right. They filed E-Verify. Our team back in Omaha has really dug into this. It appears there's about 100 individuals that had fake identities, so they were here illegally, had fake identities, and in some cases, the identities of other citizens in the United States. And so this was a long-term investigation, and they went to this company. They were looking for specific individuals, and they found them and detained them. So this was not your normal just raid for illegal immigration. They were looking for specific individuals with fake identities, and they found them.
And are you following that case, since that's in your district, to find out what's going on and how detainees are being treated? Because we're hearing about ICE facilities having very bad conditions.
Well, our director of operations there, our district director, he's also our vice chief of staff for our whole office, went to the facility, did the research, found out what was going on why did they do this raid. And so the information that we learned was a little different than what was being reported. It was about fake identities, and actual other people's identities were being taken. And I couldn't tell you personally, the quality of life in these facilities, but we had personnel at the scene.
We have Representative Don Bacon with us for the next 20 minutes or so. So if you'd like to call him and ask him a question, you can do so. He's a Republican of Nebraska. The lines are by party, so Republicans are on 202-748-8001. Democrats are on 202-748-8000, and Independents 202-748-8002. Defense Secretary Hegseth will be in front of your committee today, I believe. Do you have confidence in him in that role, according to what you have seen so far?
I have a lot of questions and I have a lot of concerns. First of all, I like what he says. Our national security should start with homeland security. I agree. I agree that China is a pacing threat and that we have to be prepared for deterring China with Taiwan and other parts of the Far East. I agree with that. What I never hear is that Russia is a threat. Russia has invaded Ukraine. In fact, 9 times they've expanded their border since 1991 by force. If we don't stop them in Ukraine, there'll be a 10th time and 11th time. And just this week, Putin said that if we didn't take the Baltic countries out of NATO, he wouldn't stop the war in Ukraine. And to me, this tells you everything you need to know what Putin's doing. He's trying to restore his old borders. It's not just Ukraine. It's
He wants the Soviet Union back.
Yeah, he wants essentially the old borders of the Soviet Union back. And I want clarity from this administration and our Secretary of Defense that this is a problem. And so we're going to push him on that. I will also question the firing of the 4-star generals. The President and the Secretary of Defense have every right to fire someone and hire who they want. But there's a thing called decency here that we let people know why you fire them. And the American people deserve to know, why do we fire the chairman of the Joint Chiefs? Why do we fire the Navy Chief of Staff? Why did we fire the commander of Cyber Command? I worked with a lot of these people. I was colonels with several of them, 1-stars with them. These were people who gave their whole adult life to their country.
So why were they fired, do you think?
There's never been an explanation.
Is it political? Is it because they're not loyal to the administration or they're not seen
They haven't
as loyal?
said, but I know these people are loyal. Now, there was some questions from Pete Hegseth himself saying that General Brown was a Biden guy kind of thing. But President Biden was the president. When you're the chairman of the Joint Chiefs, you follow the president. When you get a new president, you take those orders and you change. You do what the new president wants. I think it's sort of wrong to fault 4-star generals for following the chain of command. You want them to do that. So I think that's about the most I've heard from this administration why they were fired. Too close to President Biden, but he was the president. And you want your chain of command to follow the president and the Secretary of Defense. When you have a change of administration, you follow those orders then. But that's about the most I've heard on why they were fired. And I've got to tell you, General Hawk, the Cyber Command commander, was groomed for this job for about a decade. No one could fill his shoes right now. The only people happy about firing General Hawk were Russia and China, who are doing massive cyber operations against us every day.
Do you feel confident that the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and the Secretary of Defense would be able to stand up to the president and say, sir, that order is not lawful, that order is not something that we can carry out as the U.S. military, which happened in the first term, right? I mean, you remember President Trump in the first term said, we should shoot the protesters in the knees. This is the George Floyd protesters. And the military said, no, we don't do that. So what do you think?
I do think the president says things that he doesn't really mean, but he should be more careful. He is the president. I have confidence in the chairman of the Joint Chiefs. I personally don't know him, but I 30 years in the Air Force, I know people who do, and they like him. They think he's a smart guy. So I have confidence that he would, follow the Constitution and tell the president what he thought. So everybody that I know that knows the chairman holds him in a very high regard. So I do think that he would be good on this.
The Army, as you know, is celebrating their 250th birthday. There's going to be a parade on the streets of Washington, D.C. What do you think of that? Do you support that?
It's not something we normally do in our country, but I think it's a big to-do about nothing. It's a parade. To me, I don't think it's a big deal one way or the other way. So.
Let me show you what Senator Rand Paul, a Republican of Kentucky,
I read his comments
said.
this morning.
Okay, we'll share it with everybody else. He says, never been a big fan of goose-stepping soldiers and big tanks and missiles rolling down the street. So if you ask me, I wouldn't have done it. I'm not sure what the actual expense of it is, but I'm not really, he goes, we were always different than the images you saw of the Soviet Union and North Korea. We were proud not to be that. And I'm not proposing that that's the image people want to project, but I'm worried about the image, that it isn't necessarily the best image show. That's from Fox News.
Right.
What are your thoughts on that this looks like North Korea and the Soviet Union?
I hear that that's the position of many on it. I just don't know if it's that big of a deal. I mean, it's a parade. We're showing up. We're going to show off our tanks. I just don't have. I just don't get too caught up in this thing one way or the other way. I wouldn't do it myself. Our tradition is not to do it.
It's
But
estimated at $40 million.
If $40 million
Is it worth
cost,
it?
probably not.
Are you going to attend?
No, I'm going to be out of the city. It's going to be during the break, so we're gone.
All right.
But that's, I mean, it is our soldiers. We're proud of our soldiers. It's not a big deal.
All right. Let's talk to callers. Start with Rod.